Ladies and gentlemen, this is the first video of the year on Football Fanalysts Network, and I really love this time of the year, if it's not the NFL season, because this is the time where you're going to see the direction that teams are heading in, and a lot of these wide receivers are moving right now, so we got to do our initial rankings for 2025 fantasy football. And of course, make sure to go down there, drop a like on this video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. So getting into our first tier right here, I've got Ja'Marr Chase and CeeDee Lamb at number 1 and 2. So with Ja'Marr Chase, I don't think that much is going to change from last year because he was so dominant because Joe Burrow was having a dominant season, right? Well, Joe Burrow is going to be, slinging the rock to Ja'Marr Chase for the end of time, right? That's not the question here. The question ultimately is that Ja'Marr Chase still is without a contract. Now, by the time you're watching this, maybe it's different, but Ja'Marr Chase is going to be signed by the Cincinnati Bengals. He's not a free agent now. They're going to sign him because they know how important he is to this offense. And I just think it's just going to be more the same dominance with Ja'Marr Chase in 2025. And at CeeDee Lamb at number 2, I think that CeeDee Lamb, just based on what he did last year without Dak Prescott, should show you everything that you need to know. CeeDee Lamb is an elite wide receiver. Everybody knew that before 2024. Some people might forget that after 2024, but the guy is fantastic. Number 2, Dak will be back this year, and I think that just goes to show, what can be done over the years with Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb together. These two are fantastic together. And the Cowboys also haven't made a move for a wide receiver. They just re-signed Kevontae Turpin. That doesn't mean anything for this team's number 2 wide receiver. It's still wide open. CeeDee Lamb will dominate in targets yet again. Now, dropping down to our next tier, I've got Puka Nacua at number 3 and Amon-Ra St. Brown at 4. So you're going to see some fading here from a very, very big name that we'll get into here in a minute. But I think with Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams coming over to the Rams this offseason, I think it's going to help Puka. The thing with Puka is that he's clearly, again, established himself as a dominant number 1 in the NFL and in fantasy football. No questions about that. When you actually look at Puka Nacua and what the value of his fantasy points per game was in 2024, the guy was a top 5 wide receiver in fantasy points per game. So all he needs is a healthy full season with Matt Stafford, who is back. And I think that Puka Nacua is going to be a great pick in fantasy drafts again. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown at 4. Without Ben Johnson, there's going to be some questions, right? What is this offense going to look like? Everybody's back as far as personnel, but of course there's going to be a major subtraction to that team in the form of Ben Johnson not being in there. And I think that ultimately that might end up benefiting Amon-Ra St. Brown because the one strength that Ben Johnson had, and a great offensive coordinator is going to have, is spreading the ball out to all the different weapons, right? I think the new offensive coordinator is going to come into this offense, really want to utilize his 2 running backs, but I think there might be a little bit of a struggle from the offensive coordinator's standpoint of, just spreading the ball out. And that's exactly what happened with Amon-Ra last year and why he wasn't as dominant in fantasy. I think it goes back to being more of an Amon-Ra-centric passing offense, and I think that Amon-Ra is going to be the primary beneficiary of this passing game moving forward. Now, Justin Jefferson is the number 5, and Nico Collins is number 6. So, as I just said, Justin Jefferson, I faded him a little bit this year. I'm fading him, and I'll tell you the reason why is because I just don't know what to expect with J.J. McCarthy. Sam Darnold is out the door. He's in Seattle now, so that means that it's going to be, for the 3rd straight year, a new quarterback, 2nd straight year. This doesn't seem like a great fit for me year 1 because Justin Jefferson obviously relies on tons of targets. I mean, the guy's a fantastic player. That's why he's still top 5. But the thing with J.J. McCarthy is that when you look back at what he did with Michigan, this guy was not a 30, 35 plus per game thrower. He just didn't throw that many times at Michigan. They ran the ball a ton, and Jim Harbaugh asked him to throw the ball like 20, 25 times a game at most. So I just don't know how it's going to work with him coming into this pass-first offense. I get it. Kevin O'Connell's a great coach. I really like the guy, but I just don't think I see Justin Jefferson having a dominant year in fantasy year 1 with J.J. McCarthy. J.J. at number 5. And Nico Collins at number 6. I've got no problem with Nico Collins here. I think that Nico is going to be really, really good again. The guy was mostly great in 2024, aside from the injuries. And then after the injury, C.J. Stroud just wasn't playing as great again. I think Nico Collins comes into this year with C.J. Stroud in his 3rd year and takes a leap. I think if Nico Collins stays healthy, Nico Collins is easily a top 10 guy. borderline top 5 guy. The guy has just tremendous athleticism. The guy is going to get tons of yards after the catch. He's going to be their primary end zone threat. They're not re-signing Stephon Diggs by what it looks like. So I just think that Nico Collins at this point is a bona fide number 1. Similar to a guy like Puka Nacua, although not as dominant from a target perspective as Puka Nacua is. Now dropping down to our next tier, I've got Brian Thomas Jr. at 7, and don't forget about Rashee Rice at number 8. Brian Thomas Jr. is just coming into a situation that I just still don't love. You know, I have to obviously give him his flowers because he overachieved based on what he had. He had Trevor Lawrence, who was just not that great of a quarterback, and then for the most of the season, he actually had different quarterbacks. And he was still able to overcome that and become a top 6, top 7 wide receiver, depending on the format you're playing in. Now, I think in a half PPR format, Brian Thomas Jr. is still going to get all those touchdowns that he was getting last year. I think he's still going to have the big plays. I just don't ultimately know how he fits with Trevor Lawrence. That's why I'm a little weary of putting him at 7, but I do think that he's going to overcome it just like he did in his rookie year. And then Rashee Rice at number 8. Like I said, do not forget about Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice, if you just look at it from a points per game perspective, the guy was on pace to be a top 5 wide receiver. He was. Like, he was just dominant for the Chiefs. He was so clearly the number 1 that they were looking for. And I think he's going to be that in 2025. The guy, there was articles and, reports that potentially he could have played that Super Bowl. Well, obviously he didn't play that Super Bowl, but what that should show you is the guy is going to be 100% fully healthy coming into 2025 training camp, OTAs. The guy is going to be there. He's going to be healthy, and I think he's going to be extremely motivated. So I just think that with Mahomes coming in as the number 1 target in Kansas City, Rashee Rice is going to be a top 10 guy this year. Do not forget, the guy's price on Underdog right now, by the way, it's beautiful. You got to draft him. Malik Neighbors at 9 and Jackson Smith-Njigba at number 10. With Malik Neighbors, still very nervous about this one too. It's such a similar story to Brian Thomas Jr. because he's so dominant, right? There's no question about his dominance as a player and what he did in his rookie year, but the Giants still have no answer at quarterback. By the time you're watching this, maybe the Giants got either Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers, as of the time of this filming, is still with the New York Jets. They're going to cut him on Wednesday, which is when you're seeing this, so maybe he's with the Giants now. Either way, Malik Neighbors is in just a bad situation quarterback-wise, just like last year. And Malik Neighbors had a great start, but he just couldn't finish strong because of the quarterback dysfunction. It doesn't look like it's going to be tremendously different this year. So I just, it's a problem here. And this one's very fluid like Brian Thomas Jr.'s. Although I love the talent, I'm going to bet on it. And then I would say Jackson Smith-Njigba, several things changed, right? No more Geno Smith. He got traded to the Raiders. They came up right at the beginning of free agency, signed Sam Darnold, 3 years, $100 million. So that's his quarterback for the next several years in all likelihood. Well, the number 2 thing is that Jackson Smith-Njigba is now on his own in this wide receiver room. Tyler Lockett cut about a week ago, and DK Metcalf traded to the Steelers, who maybe we'll talk about later. Jackson Smith-Njigba, it ultimately doesn't worry me too much that this guy is playing with a different quarterback this year. Because he's such a great route runner, and he's so dominant at just taking those short yardage plays. It's kind of like a Justin Jefferson situation. I'm not saying he's JJ. I'm just saying that JSN is in that similar mold to where I don't really worry about a tremendous quarterback drop-off because he has so many ways of getting the ball. So I think that Jackson Smith-Njigba all alone this year is going to be really good for the Seahawks, and in fantasy football is going to be really good as well. Drake London at 11 and A.J. Brown at 12 rounding out this tier. So obviously there's going to be discussions about number 11 and 12. Drake London to me is just in a good spot because he's getting the Michael Penix bump. And I'm going to say bump because Kirk Cousins wasn't good for Drake London at the back half of the year. He obviously had some good performances with Kirk at the beginning of 2024, but obviously Kirk is way past it. He's over the hill. Michael Penix came in, looked good, and I think with a full offseason, he's going to come in with Drake London as that clear number 1 and going to be really dominant. So I think that Drake London is in a good spot heading into 2025. And with A.J. Brown at this point, guys, I don't want to draft him. I've seen his price on Underdog already. I've seen what the guy has done, for this team in the past, calendar year. I'm not saying A.J. Brown stinks all of a sudden. I'm not saying that close. I'm just saying that this team is a definite run-first team. It's not close. Like, this team is run first or go home. So Jalen Hurts is going to continue to throw 20 to 25 balls per game. And A.J. Brown just isn't getting that much work because they've got other weapons too. So A.J. Brown at this point, I think he's still going to have some dominant games in 2025, but I think that this is a time where you just let people take A.J. Brown. Like I said, with A.J. Brown, you can see his price on Underdog on the screen. But if you look at someone like Rashee Rice is a way better draft pick for what you're going to get him. He's going to be better in 2025 in fantasy football if he can stay healthy, and he's a lot cheaper too. So if you want to do this and you want to get in on it today and you're a sicko like me and just want to draft, Underdog is the place to do it right now. It's a $10 draft. You got a chance to win $250,000, $250,000 for first place. And the prize pool is fantastic, man. You've got plenty of places where if you get fourth or fifth, you're still coming out with like 5-figure money, man. I won $19,000 on Underdog in 2024 from 3 different tournaments make the finals. I endorse Underdog for everybody to play. It's so fun. So if you want to hop in on one of these Underdog drafts, go down in the comments and grab the link that's there and use code FFN to sign up for Underdog. When you get in on one of these drafts on Underdog, they will match your first deposit 50% up to $1,000 in bonus credits. Now, dropping out to our next tier, I've got Terry McLaurin at 13 and Tyreek Hill at 14. So with Terry, obviously there's a new addition. Deebo Samuel is now a Washington Commander. I think that helps Terry McLaurin because here's the thing that you got to look at, right? Deebo Samuel is not a traditional wide receiver. So I don't see him taking, more than 80, 90 targets away from Terry McLaurin. I don't see them coming out of Terry McLaurin's workload. I think Terry McLaurin is going to have a very similar workload. All that is going to happen is he's going to move forward another step with Jaden Daniels. Now, I do think that there won't be maybe as many touchdowns this year because Terry McLaurin was a very touchdown-heavy player in 2024. That's hard to predict. But I do think Terry McLaurin is still going to be that same guy for this offense as far as importance and as far as him being the dominant bona fide number one for Jaden Daniels. I think he's another great pick this year. And Tyreek Hill, I just think that we've seen the best. We've seen the best of it. And honestly, this might be a little generous. We still don't know what Tyreek Hill's doing. The Dolphins, they're not committing to keeping the guy. He came out and he said after, coming out after week 17 and saying, I want out. He came out back and said, yeah, I was a little hasty. I probably shouldn't say that. Now they're not saying yeah, we're committed to him. They're not saying that at all. So he may very well be on the move. And even if he stays, man, we've seen the best of Tyreek Hill. He's at the age cliff, man. So I just don't see Tyreek Hill being better than top 14. This is kind of his ceiling, in my opinion. Very fluid ranking right here. Ladd McConkey at 15 and Garrett Wilson at 16. Ladd McConkey, I still am kind of I don't know what to do with him, to be honest with you guys, because I don't think the Chargers are going to go into this season with the same wide receiver room. I just don't think they will. Now, it appears less and less likely they're going to make a wide receiver move. Maybe they could get an Amari Cooper on a cheap deal, and I don't think that impacts Ladd too much. But if they come in and they draft a wide receiver in the second round, I don't think that Ladd McConkey is going to be as dominant as he was in his rookie season. I still think Ladd McConkey is going to be a good player in fantasy. I just worry right now people are overdrafting him because there's no wide receiver competition right now. That could change here in a couple months. So Ladd's ranking right now is also very fluid. Garrett Wilson at 16. It's tough, guys. I feel similar to how I felt with Garrett Wilson over the years. Justin Fields is now the New York Jets quarterback. They signed him for starter money. He's going to start for them. And I just don't see how that's much of a positive. Now, I will give him this. Garrett Wilson, we know, is great, right? We know that he's great. He just had a good year with Aaron Rodgers, who was not particularly great. And Garrett Wilson, there's also the element where it's like DJ Moore had his best season with Justin Fields. I think it's very possible, but I just don't have tons of excitement for this because of the fact that I don't think that he's as good of a pocket passer as Aaron Rodgers was. And whether Aaron Rodgers was good for Garrett Wilson or not, he did provide a pretty steady, completion percentage to Garrett Wilson that I just don't trust Justin Fields will be able to do. So I've got Garrett Wilson at 16, also fluid. Dropping down to our next tier, Marvin Harrison Jr. at 17 and Mike Evans at 18. With Marvin Harrison, this is also one I'm not super certain about. I think Marvin Harrison has a wide range of outcomes come 2025. I think he could either be a top 10 wide receiver or be basically around where he was, top 30, top 35. I think they're both likely, right? Because Marvin Harrison Jr., I went through this on my Dynasty channel, Dynasty Fanalysts. Went through a video basically, outlining that Kyler Murray has only had one wide receiver with one season as a top 30 wide receiver. Top 30. That's pretty crazy, man. So I just don't see tons of hope for Marvin with this landing spot. I don't think it's as good as we once thought it was when he was drafted there. I do trust Marvin, though, to take the leap. I think Marvin is too good not to take the leap, so I've got him here at 17 for now. Mike Evans at 18. I'm going back and forth on this one right now. We're in March, so it's very, very logical to just think about it this way. Do you want to take the shot on Mike Evans, who will be 32 at the start of the season, since he's been so dominant for this team forever? Or do you think maybe it's the time to just get off the train? Because Keenan Allen declined at 32. Devontae Adams, while still good, declined at 32. DeAndre Hopkins has declined. There's just not many receivers that are playing past 32 dominant football. So this could very easily be the season that you get caught holding the bag with Mike Evans. I think it's very possible, but I do also think it's a good best ball pick because I don't think that his price is outrageous enough for me to balk at taking him, but I also don't think that he's going to be a bona fide number one in fantasy this year. I think we'll see little signs of regression. It just depends on how much. Devontae Adams at 19 and DJ Moore at 20. I really like this fit for Devontae Adams with the Rams. I think it's a really, really good fit. Look, they got it for 2 years, about $40 million, and Devontae Adams is still a very good player. Last year with the Jets and with the Raiders, the guy was a top 20 wide receiver. He had really dominant moments. So now he gets Matt Stafford, who at this point is better than Aaron Rodgers. And he's not coming in expected to be the number one. I think he's just going to dominate on him every touch he gets, basically. The guy is still a really good wide receiver. And I just think that with this pass-first offense, Devontae Adams is going to get a ton of work. And I think he's going to be a really, really good pick in fantasy. He's one of my early favorites right now in drafts, to be honest with you guys. DJ Moore at 20. I will tell you this. I want to believe that there's more hope for DJ Moore and Caleb Williams. I was not encouraged based on what happened last year, clearly. And I also just do worry about Caleb Williams hitting a number one particularly often. He didn't do it in college. His best receiver in college was Jordan Addison. And Jordan Addison that year didn't even have 1,000 yards with USC. DJ Moore, I just think that there's a danger here that Rome Odunze could get a lot of work as well, which is not bad for the offense, but it is bad for fantasy football and bad for DJ Moore. Now, if they end up getting this offensive line right this offseason like they're trying to, and Caleb has more time to throw, DJ will get better because DJ is elite. But I still am not certain how I feel about this Bears offense, but I also think DJ Moore is just too elite to keep outside the top 20 right now. Dropping down to our next tier, Xavier Worthy at 21, Jalen Waddle at 22. Now with Xavier Worthy, obviously there's offseason news. Guy got arrested. We're not going to go into it too much. But Xavier Worthy, just his ending to 2024 was very similar to how Rashee Rice's rookie season ended in 2023. Just kept going up, going up, going up. His trajectory was high at the end of the season. He peaked at the end. Now, obviously, it's a very similar offseason start to what Rashee Rice had. But Xavier Worthy, I just don't think that he's the number one that Rashee Rice is. And I don't think people will argue that. I think Rashee Rice is the number one target, which will make him the better fantasy wide receiver. But Xavier Worthy, if he is able to stay healthy and able to stay out of trouble, not get suspended, I think he's a top 25 guy. The guy is going to be a clear deep threat because he was being used as that. And he's more than that, too. He's more of a utility guy as well that they are absolutely committed to using. So Xavier Worthy is going to have tons of ways to score in fantasy football. It kind of reminds me of a Deebo Samuel type of role that I think he will continue to have for the Chiefs moving forward. Jalen Waddle, I think, returns back to top 25 status this year. Jalen Waddle's had a rough couple seasons here, and I just think that with Jalen Waddle, there is the element of Tyreek Hill that is very uncertain. As I went through earlier, he may not even be on the team. And if he's not on the team, I think Jalen Waddle's top 15. But if he is on the team, which is what I'm assuming right now, since we have no new information, I think Jalen Waddle still is really good this year. I think he's a good pick because of his last 2 years not being as good. He's a low pick in underdog drafts right now. And I also think that when you factor in what Tyreek's age is going to bring for this 2025 season, I think Jalen Waddle easily could finish above Tyreek Hill. Like I said earlier, Tyreek Hill, his position in my rankings, very, very fluid. And right now, that's kind of like being really generous. Jalen Waddle has a 100% chance of being better than Tyreek Hill is in fantasy in 2025. I'll keep him at 22 for now. Brandon Ayuk at 23 and T. Higgins at 24. So with Brandon Ayuk, he's clearly going to be either the number one in San Francisco or the number one in a different offense. It just depends on if they trade him or not. Apparently, they're open to trading him even after trading Deebo Samuel. They're blowing up the operation in San Francisco, basically. They're blowing it up. So Brandon Ayuk, I do think, is going to have a good season for where he's being drafted at. He's basically a wide receiver 3 in underdog drafts. That's a good price for a Brandon Ayuk who has top 15 upside. I don't think he'll be top 15 this year. I think that ACL will be a factor in 2025, but I do still think he'll be important enough on this offense if he's there and important enough on another offense if he goes somewhere else to where he's just going to be too important to not demand 6, 7, 8 targets per game. I think that's why he's got to be inside the top 25 right now. T. Higgins at 24. T. Higgins is going to be interesting to watch. Tagged again, still looking for a long-term deal. Doesn't look like he's going to get it with the Bengals, but he's going to be with the Bengals. So as long as he stays healthy and Burrow stays healthy, he's going to be dominant in certain weeks. Now, this was his best statistical season in fantasy in 2024, and I do think that he has a lot of upside, obviously, as a player moving forward. But I think it's going to be more the same as what we've seen from T. Higgins. The quarterback situation is the same. Jamar Chase will be there. T. Higgins is still going to be that same guy. He'll be dominant in certain weeks and then not as dominant in others. I think it'll be more the same with T. Higgins as long as he plays on the franchise tag. And then Deebo Samuel at 25 to round this out. I am actually a really big fan of this team fit too. Devontae Adams and Deebo Samuel, I like those team fits. Deebo Samuel, I think, was ready for a scenery change. He said it himself. The 49ers said it themselves. And now he goes to the Washington Commanders with an offensive coordinator who's very creative. Cliff Kingsbury is going to find ways, similar to the 49ers, to use Deebo Samuel. He knows that he's not a traditional number one, that you could just send on tons of routes, give him 150 targets. That's not Deebo Samuel. And I don't think Washington sees it that way either. I think a new change of scenery is going to be a good year for Deebo Samuel. He may be over the hill. That's why he's at top 25. I think he's definitely not the player he used to be. But I do think he could get a flash in the pan season to where he provides serious value for where you're drafting him in underdog drafts right now. And dropping down to our last tier, Chris Godwin at 26, Zay Flowers at 27. Chris Godwin goes back to Tampa, gets a good deal. The one worry I have with Chris Godwin is not Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield and him clearly have good chemistry. I was wrong on him heading into 2024. The one thing that worries me is the injury history. 2 major injuries to his lower body, and he's approaching 30. So I just don't know how that's going to recover in 2024 with Baker Mayfield. I do worry about that. That's why I'm safeguarding myself down here at 26. I just get concerned with this age factor and with the injury factor with Chris Godwin, but he could easily shoot up my rankings if some other things happen to some other players ahead of him. Zay Flowers at 27. I think he is what he is, to be honest with you. He's a short yardage guy, not going to get in the end zone too much. He'll have some boom games. He'll have a lot of bust games. Zay Flowers is what he is. Lamar Jackson as a thrower is what he is. And he's going to spread the ball around. He's not going to use Zay as a dominant number one. Zay is the number one wide receiver, but there's going to be a lot of games Rashad Bateman's involved, right? There's going to be a lot of games like that. So I just see Zay Flowers is what he is, top 30 guy, basically right on that fringe. I don't think you should be thinking he's going to take a big leap this year. Jaden Reed at 28. Jerry Jeudy at 29. Jaden Reed, I think, also is sort of similar to Zay Flowers, where he is what he is. Jaden Reed, I do think, is still going to be the number one fantasy wide receiver for the Green Bay Packers. Unless they draft a guy, unless they trade for a guy, I see Jaden Reed as the number one wide receiver in fantasy for the Packers. But Jaden Reed, if that's the case, is going to be what he is. He's going to be a short yardage guy. He's going to take some runs. He'll get in the end zone a decent amount of times. But that's really the ultimate defining factor of how good he'll be in fantasy is how many touchdowns the guy gets. Because he's not going to get enough targets to be a dominant number two wide receiver. He's not going to get enough carries to be a dominant number two wide receiver. It's going to come down to touchdowns here. That will separate him from wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 territory. Jerry Jeudy, really hard to tell right now. No answer at quarterback. Clearly, it won't be Deshaun Watson. We don't have to worry about that disaster that would be impending if he was to play in 2025. He will not play. He tore his Achilles twice during the offseason. So he's out. Basically, it comes down to, what are they going to do? Are they going to go with Kenny Pickett that they just traded for? That would be a disaster. Or are they going to draft Cam Ward? That would be an interesting one. Jerry Jeudy is beholden to quarterback play, as all wide receivers are, of course. But we have no idea what the Browns are doing right now. Got to put him at 29. And DK Metcalf at 30. We'll end it with DK Metcalf. I hate the team fit. I do. I think the team fit stinks. I think that it is a situation where you've got two selfish wide receivers who want the ball. They're both loudmouths. The Steelers also don't have a great answer at quarterback. Looks like they're getting Aaron Rodgers. We'll see how that whole thing turns out with those two guys. I think it's a disaster. I think you'll have enough games where he's still dominant enough as a player to where he'll be a good player in certain weeks in fantasy, better than George Pickens. But I don't think it's going to be anywhere near as consistent as some would hope for. And I don't think that it's going to be worth his draft price in fantasy football this year. So let me know where your head's at with these rankings to start out in 2025.